Hello, folks. Your friendly neighborhood adventure sew-along host, Cheryl here. A little bit late. Apologies for that. It's been a bit of a busy day. Nothing but appointments and driving and talking and a few tears. Had a little breakdown today, if I'm being honest. Not intentionally. Was not feeling like it was coming, but I was driving to my physio and chiropractic appointment, having some hip issues. So I'm driving to the appointment and Wilson Phillips, of all things, comes on the radio. You know the song. Everyone over the age of 40 knows the song I'm talking about. That song comes on and I'm singing along, and then all of a sudden I'm crying. And it was sad. And I pulled up to the clinic where I get my physio and my chiropractic, and I'm bawling. And so I had to take a couple minutes to compose myself before I went in. And I was like, well, apparently I needed that. Could do without the dog squeaking his dog toy out there. But he plays fetch with himself down the stairs. He drops it and then chases it and then catches it. So you might hear that. Anyways, so that's been my day. Meetings and stress, and then a breakdown to Wilson Phillips, of all things. Hello, pup. You did not bring, okay, just making sure. He came in the room, which is fine, but making sure he did not bring his squeaky toy. Let's say hello. Say hi, Elmer. Hey, Bubs. Hello. I guess he's joining me today, or us today, for a little while. Anywho. Let's get to sewing. Now that I've, confessed my embarrassment over that. Sometimes you need to cry. That's all you can do. Just lean in, have the cry, move on with life. Today is week 21 of the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sew-Along Rainbow Edition, which means if you're doing rows and you're doing all the blocks, we are at the end of the third row, which is wild to me. I can't believe we're there already. So let's get at her. I caught up on the blocks on the bottom last night during intermission of the hockey game. Boo Dallas. Go Oilers. Let's do better tomorrow. But I did make the block for today, which is this variation on a log cabin. This was the version I did in my monochrome fabrics. So we start with a square of our background fabric, and then we do logs around. You're going to not want, how do I put it? We're going to do at least 2 rounds of our rainbow fabrics with our background fabric in the middle. What you want overall for the block, again, you can change it. It's your block. Do whatever you want. But I wanted, and the way I've designed the block is that you have the background fabric in the center, and then you want to have logs all the way around. So everybody's block is going to be different. If we all use the same fabrics, it would still all be different, because the size of the beginning block can vary. The shape of it can vary, right? Is a pure square, rectangle, whatever it is. And then how wide you make your strips. I think that you are going to want at least 2 rounds of your logs, but you may not want more than that. Because see, if I had gone a 3rd round, I wouldn't have had space for my background fabric. So I've only gone 2 rounds, which means, let's do the math, there's 4 sides and you're going to go 2 rounds. That means you're going to have 8 pieces. So if you have 6 rainbow fabrics, 2 of them are going to go in twice. So just think about that, but I'm going to show you an alternate way to get all of your fabrics in kind of a funky way. This, I happen to have trimmings and strips that I could cut quite easily to make my rounds. And I repeated the white fabric twice, and then I think this lighter one, I repeated twice in the block. So everyone's is going to be a little bit different. go with it, but I think the benefit of the design is that you have the background in the center and then an entire round of logs of the background on the outside. How wonky or big or whatever, that's entirely up to you, but we're just going to play with that. Okay, so let's get over here. The dog left the room. I will turn the camera around. We will say hello to our lovely ladies. And then I'm going to get here onto the cutting table. And I'm actually going to kind of position you this way so I don't have to keep moving it. Basic supplies, you're going to need that square of your background. And then you're going to need more fabric to make the logs around. This is actually just like a trimming. So you can see that I have, like I just kind of cut a big piece off the edge there. So I'll probably get a few strips out of the center because it's quite wide. But how much you have around the edge will kind of depend mostly on how big you make your strips. So on the monochromatic version, I had one strip for each side, right? A white, a black, one of the light grays, medium gray, darker gray, right? A strip for each size. On this block, I dug into my scraps and I pre-sewed a little bit of this. I just made a giant strip from a bunch of scraps. All of the pieces are slightly different widths. You can see that particularly there. The way to keep this under control is try to have, and I just want to come down here to show you, like around the orange piece here. You're not going to have a perfect line up straight. That's okay. We can fix that as we go. But if you have pieces that are pretty different in size, that's okay. Just make sure one side is lining up. And then when you add another piece, you're lining up there as well. Okay? It's not, don't be too fussed is what I'm getting at with it. So I'm going to go ahead with this square that I've got. I'm going to take my piece. I'm just starting on one end of it. And if you want to have that be a square, here's your cheater trick. Fold whatever piece you cut on the diagonal, and this extra bit is what makes it a rectangle. So you can do that without a ruler. And that way I have more of a square piece. It's not cut straight, so that's all right. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lay these fabrics right sides together. I'm going to sew that first seam. Yes, I like to trim off before I sew the next piece. So it's one of those blocks where we're going to have starting and stopping, but it goes pretty quick. There, I'm going to grab my seam roller. I always find log cabins work really nicely if you press out, as in away from the center. So I have this strip left. That's what I'm going to sew on next. Right? Now, what I'm noticing is that my seam right here is pretty close to the pink. I would not want it to be right on the pink, right? So that it matches perfectly, so that when you see it, you know, it's not going to look like you even had that pink, but I can overlap it just enough that it works. It'll probably be the same on the orange. It'll change as we start adding blocks or adding logs. Now, if you have this instance where you can see my pink and my orange are not quite, you know, totally lined up right here, so I have a little bit white, you can do this super easy trick. Just give yourself a fresh edge. And you could do it after you sew, or you can do it before. It's really not a big deal. Right, and then we're just going to continue to go around always try to rotate when you're making a log cabin, rotate your block for the next piece. So I had the first piece here, I rotated it counterclockwise, added the log, so I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise again, and I will add the next one. Again, if you're not going to get kind of that overlap that you want, I'm going to go with this, because I think what's going to happen on the next one is I won't have any yellow in the corner. So again, you can do that before or afterwards, where you give yourself a nice fresh edge to work with. Take the time to do that fresh edge, whether you do it before you sew it or you trim it afterwards. But take that time, because that's going to help your block lay nicely. Right? These are the little things of improv sewing that, if you don't do, contribute to that stereotype of, oh, it's all just a mess. It's not. It's not all a mess. So see here, I have this tiny bit of yellow. I'm not going to bother sewing that on. I can go, ooh, look at that. I can go, oh, if it's just a little bit. So I'm just going to show you on this side. Right? I would have this tiny bit of yellow and right to the edge of the blue. So I kind of want to not have that. So I'm actually going to just move this and trim off from both sides. So I'll have some blue and green on this strip. There. So you always have that freedom, that wiggle room to play with it. Maybe you're going with an individual color on each side. Right, if you really want to have all of your 6 rainbow colors in there, you can also go 3 rounds. If you're going to do that, right, because then you would have 6 fabrics when they go around a thing 3 times 4, right, because 4 times, and you go around 3 times, that's 12. So then you would have 2 pieces of each color. Just make sure they're not super thick, or start with a smaller square. Okay, continuing on. So that's my first round done. I'm going to head now into my second round and add this strip, which is going to have blue and purple on it. Right, and then I think the next strip will have purple and pink. I'm really kind of liking it with this decision. This was an early morning, this morning decision. Just because it's going to have a lot of movement in the block. Plus it used scraps. I just went into the scrap bin for this project, and it's using scraps, and so I like that. You could change it up and not have things in rainbow order, right? I've done these scraps and they are in rainbow order, the way that I made the strip set, but that doesn't mean you have to. I didn't on my monochromatic. The strips are not sewn on in the, color order of what I'm doing. So you can see it's not a labor intensive process. It's just the starting and the stopping. Anytime I'm making log cabins, if I'm being honest, I don't tend to want to make multiples at a time, just because you feel like you're making some progress on stuff a little bit more. Okay. So we're going to go there. Give myself that fresh cut. And then I only have one side left to add. Maybe. And I'll show you what I mean after I do the 2 sides. Give that a press. All right, we got one more side to add on. don't really think that that orange is going to overlap. So even rather than cutting it, I'm just actually trimming that off. I'm going to add this and then we're going to have a discussion. So you'll see that on pretty much every strip I've been adding or making that little trim. Just makes sure the block lays nicely for us. Okay, so let me give this a proper press and then I want to talk about some sizing stuff with it. Because the seam ruler works great as you're going, but there comes a point where you got to get the big guns out and get the iron. Okay, so now that I have my background square with 2 rounds of logs on the inside, I'm going to give this a measurement. I want to see how big this has gotten. I don't need exact, just want rough, right? So roughly, I've got about a 6.5 inch square. My blocks for this particular version of the quilt are 10.5 inches around, which means I need to make sure I'm adding kind of 2.5 inches on either side of my background fabric. If I don't want to add that much background fabric, I could go ahead and add another round to make this bigger and then have smaller backgrounds portions on the outside. If you've made this portion so large that you're going to have small or even non-existent background portions, oh well, that's what your block is. It's not a big deal to stress about it. But I'm going to go ahead with this. And honestly, you don't have to do this, but just because it is so close to exactly 6.5 inches, I'm going to go ahead and just trim it to that now. And then that's a nice trimmed edge for me. And I can go ahead and add my sides on. Now, because this is a, shall we say, precisely cut piece at this point, you might be tempted to cut these precisely, these extra bits that you're going to add on. You might be absolutely tempted to cut them precisely. I am not one of those people. I am quite comfortable just lining it up and going like that and adding and then trimming off any extra, because that's frankly easier than measuring and hoping it all fits and precisely cutting the fabric. As long as I have more than I need, I can just trim off these little bits. All I've done is create that nice straight edge. So I'm telling you, I'm giving you permission. You don't have to do that precise measurement. And it occurred to me, I didn't actually check whether I was sewing this on the correct side for where the log was due next. So my log was due next on this one. If you're ever sewing a log cabin, here, bonus tip. If you're ever sewing a log cabin, you go, oh, which side was I supposed to sew on next? Look for the piece that has a seam allowance on this side and a seam allowance on this side. That's where your next log should go. I didn't even pay attention to that. Do I care in this instance? Nope. Not one bit. Okay, so now I can also measure this and go, oh, I ended up adding quite a large piece on that side, so I don't need as big of a piece on this side, which is totally fine. So I'm going to go ahead and cut. I don't want to, here's a word of advice. I don't want to just take this large piece. You can't see all of this. I don't want to just take this large piece and slice it here, because then I'm not going to use all of this width on the strip that I am adding here. If I just cut this off here, now I've made that leftover piece that I'm going to use not able to fit potentially on some of these other pieces. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and with my ruler cut that a bit longer than I need. So I'm really just kind of cutting a strip out of it. You can see. And then I'm going to go ahead on here and trim off that overhang. I have a nice straight cut on one side and a nice straight cut on the other. Yes, I have some left over, but that's all right. We know the leftovers get used, right? Although in my house, if we're talking food leftovers, it's only me. Sometimes my husband, but usually the children, particularly the girls, forget that there are leftovers or don't care or whatever, and they languish in the fridge unless I eat them. So needless to say, some days I have really weird breakfasts or lunches that are put together from whatever randomness that we find. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and finish. I think I did this inefficiently. So for all my advice on what to do what I say, not what I do. But I'm just going to show you this. If you get to a piece and you're like, oh, that background piece just isn't quite long enough, you can make it long enough. Just add another piece right there, which is what I'm going to do. Rather than, because I know I won't get two pieces out of this, or two, like a log for here and a log for here. So rather than cut more fabric, I'm just going to use what I have and piece it. It's no big deal to do that. No one cares that there's that seam there. Really, no one cares. So now I have a piece long enough to add there, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and add that piece. Just got some little bit of overhang there, and I'll just trim that extra. So now, rather than having all of that scrap, I just have the one little piece there. So my point about the leftovers being that if you have leftover fabric, you're probably the only one who's going to care unless there's another quilter in your house, right? But you can make fabulous things out of leftovers. This entire block is trimmings and leftovers, and I think it looks pretty cool. So that is a bonus sort of scenario. So now I just have to add this one strip to the side. There it is right there. I have far more than I need. So from that one kind of trimmed piece, that's what I have left over. I'm going to go ahead, and I knew this side was straight. This side's kind of wonky. That's why I flipped it around to sew it. But again, you could have just trimmed that off. Okay, let's sew this last seam, and then we have our finished block. So you can see that it took 20 minutes-ish. I did pre-sew, but that really took like 2 minutes, the pre-sewing that I did. You know, we've been on for less than a half an hour because I was late. And then you heard my Wilson Phillips confession. And we have a finished block. And if for whatever reason you get to this point and it's not big enough, just add another log where you need it. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. There is our finished block. I will check for size because I need 10 and a half, and I've got more than enough. Now, if you have it really big, you can get creative and kind of get wonky and trim it up sort of on an angle if you have a lot of extra room. Like if I was making this a 9.5 inch block, I would actually have quite a bit of room to get, you know, sort of really kind of wonky with it, right? If I was squaring it up here, then this square would be pretty wonky in the center. Or you can go, no, I want it to be bang on straight. And so you can line up, you know, along a marking and do a cut there. That is what I am going to do, because I just feel like doing that today. My life is crazy and wonky enough at the moment. So I'm going to throw some straight lines and predictability in here. Usually improv can be quite good for allowing you to embrace that wonkiness and some go with the flow kind of mentality in life as well as in sewing. And sometimes you just need to add a little bit of order back in. So that's this week's block, week 21. I want to say a special shout out to, I think it was Louise, our friend last week, who is just coming healthy after having some strokes. If you've joined us this week, I hope you are doing well. Sending you loads of love in there. There's no questions. You're all so quiet this week. I hope you're having a great time. I'm going to say goodbye. Ooh, side note. See this little mini quilt in the frame here? That was made by my friend Andrea Sang Jackson. She has a quilt book coming out, a book called Quilt, which is fantastic. I'm halfway through reading it. I have agreed to write the foreword to her book. I'm so excited for you all to read this book. It is such a great discussion of why we quilt, how we can push ourselves in our quilting, and how we can find comfort zones in our quilting as well. And I'm only halfway through and I'm finding all of that. So I really encourage you, if you don't know her, she is on Instagram at Third Story Workshop. Check her out. I posted a story about her today. So make sure, and I'm really lucky to have her piece. Now, Connie mentioned my cockatoo. I'm just going to bring that. You can't see it. It's in the shade here. Here's my cockatoo. So I went to Australia in 2016. That is not where I got this cockatoo, but I was quite enamored of the cockatoos there. And it's a little planter, although the plant in here is dead at the moment. It got a little overcrowded and I wasn't paying attention. We were in Nakusp, BC during the pandemic. We just took a long weekend away there to hang out at the beach. And I was out for a walk in the early morning there, and somebody had dumped that. It was in a section in the garbage. Somebody was getting rid of it, and so I garbage picked the cockatoo. So no, maybe it was from Australia originally, but I got it in Nakusp. Yeah, all it says on the bottom is that Mickey with a U. So I have no idea what its origin was in Nakusp, but I picked it up from the garbage in Nakusp, and it's mine now. So we will say goodbye to the ladies, right? How could I have not picked it up? It was awesome. It was so awesome. And I was like, yeah, this is coming home with us. And my husband was like, seriously? I'm like, yep. And I'd already gone to the farmer's market and bought like 2 pieces of pottery there. So, yeah, Nakusp memories, or Australian memories via Nakusp. So there's our block for today. Let's see what she looks like with the rest of them. There we go. It's kind of a nice complement to this one right here, but a little bit different, right? Changing things up gives us a little bit of negative space over there and finishes up that row and that section. You know, there's not a lot of squared things there. So I think it works out nicely to have it in there. So that is week 21. Oh my goodness, week 21. I'm having, okay, confession before we move on. The background fabric in this monochromatic version, I'm going to run out and I don't have any more. And I'm really scared about that because I know I'm going to run out. And I'm upset because I really loved the effect in this quilt. So wish me luck. I'm going to contact Connecting Threads, who, this is my fabric that I designed, but that was years ago. But I'm going to contact them and see if, fingers crossed, maybe there's a bolt hiding in the warehouse or something, because it's long since been sold out. Or to see if I can get the files and I can digitally print some myself. Because I want to use it. I'm loving the impact and the effect on this quilt. It's busy, and you kind of don't see some of the rainbow things within it, but it just adds such a, between the fully monochromatic blocks without the fabric, I really like that result. So fingers crossed, unless someone out there in Quiltland, Quilters, Playcation, Adventure Sew-Along land, has some of this fabric of mine from Connecting Threads, wish me luck contacting the company and seeing if they have it. I'm going to leave it at that this week. I'm Cheryl Arkison, your host, here today and every week on the Quilters Playcation Adventure Sew-Along. In 2024, we're doing the rainbow edition, because who doesn't love a rainbow? I'm so glad that you have joined me all along, whether you're sewing or not. It is lovely to have you here with me. Remember, if you are sewing, we'd love to see what you're doing. If you post on Instagram, it's hashtag Quilters Playcation or QP Adventure Sew-Along or QP Adventure Sew-Along 2024. It's where you'll be able to find all the videos and all the posts that people do as well. And then maybe you're joining us from YouTube. Hi, welcome. We'll see you there as well. And maybe you can join us on Instagram when we're live. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week. May is almost over. Yay. Take care.